excited to be with you again today and have just really appreciated the opportunity to be in your life for these last 60 days and hopefully longer. But truly, the last 60 days, even though you may not have gotten the mission statement done or, your calendar set for working in all of these videos and activities, look to do that more conscientiously in the next few weeks, because creating your best life takes work and radical self-awareness. I will say that. So if you're like, oh, this is all too much work or too intense for me, know that it is the work of high-performing people. It's not something that's super easy. It's not something that everyone always looks forward to. But this radical awareness and self-awareness of who you are and how your life is, even in the hard parts, even in the places that might need some attention and change. And it's kind of like, like before you leave the house, right? You would kind of check yourself in the mirror, see how you look. It's, on that level, it's kind of this self-awareness of who you are and what's going on. And even harder is when someone says, hey, why don't you change your shirt? That doesn't look super flattering, right? Like, I am grateful when my husband actually says something like that, but it's not always the easiest thing to hear. So take it with a lot of gentleness and love for yourself, especially in these last 60 days, because things get really busy. We interact with people in a different way, and we may not always see other people's best, and it triggers us. So be really kind to yourself in this process, and know that we're really working on creating our best lives, even if it takes some work and even when it takes some self-reflection that might be hard to do. So this week I'm focusing on 3 categories of that wheel of life, and I'm kind of grouping them, as you'll see in the weeks to come, because there's some sort of similar ideas that I want to work with. And so these concepts that I'm bringing to you through this last 60 process is concepts that I would go deeper with in coaching, mainly because coaching is, and high performance coaching, which is what I do, is really about getting to the next level. And I think that that's for everyone, but maybe not. And so for people who are interested in this, it gives you a taste of, what kind of skills help you to up level. And so think about the process and what makes sense to you. So I'm grouping family, friendships, and social, and our partner in love relationship. And will not so much go specific on those, but to see what's the commonality of these categories that can help us reflect on, what is a 10 on our family category? What is a 10 on relationships, love relationships? What's a 10 in our friendships? So it's not, like I said before, having someone or the perfect ideal situation. It's really how we're being in those. So what I'd like to delve into this week is this idea of contracts. And so, we have contracts in our lives that are legal, right? So we usually sign a contract on our housing, that we're going to pay for our housing. We usually sign a contract with our employer, that we're going to show up, we're going to do this. And the other contracts that we have are informal and subconscious. And I'd really love for you to think about, first of all, just the idea of contracts, that I do this for you and you do this for me, and you do this for me, and in return I do something for you. So it's not so much the kind of quid pro quo or that part of the contracts that I would like for you to consider, although that's part of it. what I'd really love for us to explore is what is the ecosystem and the operating system that our agreements with each other might create, and how to optimize that. So one, this work is very mature and responsible. So it's not like, oh, I just happen to, have parents, and I happen to have siblings, and, we grew up with these family rules, and we're just going to keep living those family rules. What I'm talking about is really being adult and saying, okay, that's how we worked as a family growing up, because we didn't know any better, right? We were passed down rules and culture and traditions of our parents, and their parents, and culture had on us. And what we have the opportunity to do now is to renegotiate what that is. Is it working? Is it optimal? Is it harmonious for us? And that does take a lot of messy work sometimes, maybe even therapy, maybe even hard conversations. But I will assure you that just looking at our family dynamics can lead to so much more peace for ourselves, and appreciation for the other people in our family, even compassion for other people in our family, which would obviously lead to kindness and love. So think about that we're really looking at this taking more responsibility for our lives, and it's not an easy fix. It's not like, oh, I want, a 10, so I'm going to spend more time with people, because sometimes that might not be the answer. It might be spending more time in communication, or doing something fun. So it's really looking at things beneath the surface. So people who tend to sign up for things like this, like myself, are doers, right? And so if I was like, oh, the last 60, best 60 means we're going to have the best days in our year by doing more. Like, that is not what this is about. It is about pausing, reflecting, and planning. And part of that pause is this radical self-awareness and, willingness to look at how things are, and this pause to be like, and that's what I created. And then this planning of how am I going to go forward. And my suggestion to all of us is, don't try to just do more. It's not about overperforming in our relationships. It's really about renegotiating in our own ways, and that's going to take some communication, our contracts with our family, with our friends, with our partners, and future partners. And even understanding for ourselves, what is the dating and the journey to find that person so that it feels like a really joyful and fun experience, as opposed to some kind of feeling of desperation or whatever. There's a lot of things that can be. So it's not about taking more responsibility, it's about creating a co-responsibility. And knowing how to share responsibility is big work. And I mean adult work, not like it has to be hard, it has to be, a strain, but it really is like adult work. It's holding yourself accountable to things that you say you're going to do, and holding others accountable for what they say they're going to do. So that's the contract that I'm talking about, is that we hold each other responsible and accountable for making this relationship work. So that's the other thing. If you're like looking at your family life and you're like, oh, I give it a 2 because I haven't talked to my sister for a year or whatever, 6 weeks, it's not just your responsibility. There's another person in that relationship, and so it's really having some co-responsibility on this. And for each area, each category, it's going to look different. Like, we relate to our family different than we relate to our friends, and we can sometimes speak more openly with our friends than we can with our family. So just be aware that all of this is a lot of fine work as well as big work and adult work. So I just really acknowledge that this is what creating our best life and our best last 60 days is going to take, is to really look at our lives and take responsibility. So I'm just going to take an example from parenting in terms of what it means to create a contract. And I'm not a parent, but I've been around a lot of parents, and I've read a lot because I have nieces and nephews, and I have friends who have kids, and I've talked a lot about parenting with my friends. So this whole setting expectations and being consistent. So those two things really set up a relationship between parent and child that minimizes breakdowns and traumas and dramas, and really it reinforces behavior and self-soothing and responsibility. So with a parent, there are, if you do this, you'll get this. If you don't do this, you won't get this. Or if you don't do this, you'll get this. There's different contracts that parents are always negotiating. I'd love for you to consider that in your family relationships, and not to infantilize your family members or speak to them like, I know what's going on, but to have a conversation about what expectations we can agree on. And having that can really create an ecosystem where you feel both responsible and responded to in the relationship, and that there's really this co-responsibility for the outcome in the relationship. Even if that outcome is like, okay, we're just not going to talk, we can't do this. Like, that would feel fine in a relationship where you both take responsibility that we're not going to keep working on this relationship. And I think that for some people that's okay with family and with friends. Like, sometimes friendships come to a point where there's nothing more that you can do to make it better, and being together is not necessarily healthy or enjoyable. So be really open to this curating or letting go of relationships that may not serve you in this look at responsibility. And what I think that we're doing here, I believe, is creating extraordinary relationships. And the work that takes is necessary and helpful to really minimize, as I've been saying in the past, the expenditure of energy that feels like depleting, and the using of energy with certain people that feels like it comes back and it energizes us. And again, it's going to differ from person to person, and it's going to require some grace in terms of knowing who you can speak and use certain language with, and who you might need to use not so formal contract kind of language. So it might be, this would be an example of a mature kind of adult contract where you don't have to talk about like the formal contract, is like, hey, I'm going to call you in 2 weeks, and if I can't, I'll text you and let you know a better time, because if something came up, I want you to know that, and so you're not wondering where I am. So like, really give yourself some like direction and expectation and responsibility, so that the other person knows like, oh, when we talk, we'll have some time and I'll get to check in because we had such a good conversation today. Like, really like creating that expectation that you can rely on me, and if I'm not going to be there, I'll let you know. So that kind of responsibility taking and contract making is it feels really good when it starts to become more natural, and it feels really good because the other person also knows that they can count on you. So the reason why we even have contracts as legal documents is that it creates this understanding of how we're going to show up. So whether it's at work or, our housing, because that's might be a big responsibility to the bank or to your landlord, like it gives some ease to how this relationship is going to progress. So the importance of knowing on both sides a little bit more consciously in our relationship contracts can be so helpful in terms of reducing the unknown. And not like I'm saying plan everything. That's not what I'm saying. It's more of a, like, you can count on me to be here. It's kind of like what I was saying last week about being really clear about our communication. Like, I need help doing this, as opposed to just a big general I need help. Be much more explicit and aware and conscious of the kind of commitments that we're communicating to people, and also in terms of what we are offering, and then also being clear about what we can expect from others, so that a lot of times, the reason why our relationships are not so great is communication isn't clear. We don't know what to expect. We're constantly disappointed. Like, we feel like we're the ones who are overworking in the relationship. And those are common situations. And when you can decrease that constant disappointment and increase communication, it feels more responsible for what you're getting out of the relationship. And again, it really allows for you to really decide, is this a relationship that I want and it fills me up, and even though it's a lot of work, I get more and receive more in terms of love and connection than I'm giving, or not, and I'm okay with that. And that's sometimes how it feels with family. And as we take a look at the scoring part of our wheel of life, so on family, friends and social connections, and love relationship, think about what would be a 10 in each of those categories, right? So it's not, do I have a family, do I have friends, do I have a partner? It's really like, what would be a 10 in family? What does that look like? What does that feel like? How often am I seeing these people? What are we talking about? What places do we get together? And think about the same thing for your friends and your social life. Like, who are your friends? What do you talk about? Where do you go? How long do you spend together? Like, being really explicit like that, it gives your mind a target. Like, oh, that's what it looks like. And maybe you've had that once, or maybe you have that with one person and you want to have it with 3 more, right? So it gives you this like target in your mind, like, oh, that's what a 10 would look like. That's what a 10 would feel like. That's what a 10 in a love partner would be like. And to know that, relationships are a work of art. It's not like they're gonna be a 10 and hallelujah, I've got my 10. It means that we get to a 10 and we continue to explore how to keep that, because we change, we go through ups and downs. Really know that this work is just the beginning of radical self-awareness, and that awareness gives us a sense of what we want to work on and where we want to grow. So I hope this has been helpful to look at your relationships in the context of contracts. There's actually a book called The 4 Agreements, and they're just rules to live by. They're just 4 things. So that might be something that you come away with. Like, I'm honest, I show up, I apologize and take responsibility, and I love in a way that leaves people feeling appreciated and seen. Something like that. Like, that might be your contract. And that no one even has to know that, right? Like, just being aware for yourself can add so much more. I'll just end with this that I think can apply to a lot of relationships. The word yoga comes from the root word yoke, and it was, out of a agrarian time when, they got work done by using ox and a cart. And when there's two ox, you can do double the work or more than double the work. And so it makes life easier, and you can get more done, and you're stronger with two. But the thing is, when there's, two oxen, they have to be going in the same direction. Like if one wants to go this way, the other wants to go this way, it actually causes some pull and some separation and possibly even some destruction. And so this connection that we have really gets us moving together in the same direction, even if they're parallel. So really think about this idea of contracts. If you're working with me on the deeper dive, I'm going to go much deeper on how to do that. And then finally, look at for yourself, what does a 10 look like in my family life? What does a 10 look like in my friendship social circle? What does a 10 look like in my romantic relationship? And really, whether you write that down or just think about it, it gives your mind a target. And that is the best exercise we can do. It's an honor to be with you and to be part of this Last 60, Best 60, and do the work. Do the thinking and processing and radical self-awareness, because this kind of planning sets you up for the best life, your best life. Because what you did in the past got you to where you are, and if you keep doing the same thing, you know what to expect. But if you can plan and take a look at where you want to be and figure out how am I going to get there, that's a pretty extraordinary life. So thank you.